For 15 years, she'd worked at the same photography studio, capturing weddings and family portraits. She never talked about her past, never mentioned why her hands were so steady or her eyes so sharp, until artificial intelligence found her award-winning war photographs buried in news archives. Welcome to AI Human Stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of survival, artistry, and how technology uncovered a hidden Pulitzer Prize winner, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe some stories of courage deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button. Madison Photography Studio sat on Main Street in Bend, Oregon, cozy, welcoming, with soft lighting that made everyone look their best. The kind of place where nervous brides felt instantly at ease and families came to capture their happiest moments. Behind the camera was the owner, Elena Madison, 45 years old, silver streaks in her dark hair, hands that never shook no matter how long the shoot lasted. She had this gift for making people comfortable, finding the perfect angle, catching emotions that other photographers missed. Elena just sees things differently, clients would say. She captures moments that tell stories. What they meant was that Elena's photos had depth. Even simple family portraits seemed to reveal something profound about her subjects: a father's protective stance, a child's natural joy, the quiet strength in a grandmother's eyes. Elena had been in Bend for 15 years, but nobody knew much about her life before the studio. She'd moved to town with enough money to buy the business outright, spoke with a slight accent nobody could place, and never talked about family or where she'd grown up. The only clues to her past were subtle: the way she could work in any lighting condition, how she never seemed bothered by chaos or noise during big family shoots, the fact that she could handhold a camera steady for impossibly long exposures. And there were the photos on her office wall, not client work but personal pieces, black and white images that were technically perfect but emotionally haunting, empty buildings with bullet holes, children playing in rubble, an old man's hands holding a faded photograph. When clients asked about them, Elena would say, "Just some travel photography from when I was younger." But these weren't vacation snapshots. They were the work of someone who understood suffering, who could find beauty in devastation, who had witnessed things most people couldn't imagine. James Porter was a photography instructor at the local community college who'd been trying to get Elena to teach workshops for years. He'd seen her work and knew she had skills that went way beyond wedding photography. "Your technical ability is off the charts," he told her over coffee. "That portrait series you did of the firefighters, the way you captured exhaustion and determination in the same frame, that's photojournalism level stuff." Elena deflected the compliment. "I just try to see what's really there." But James wasn't wrong. Elena's photographs had qualities that separated them from typical portrait work. She could capture decisive moments, the split second when someone's true character showed through their expression. She worked incredibly fast, almost instinctively, like someone who'd learned to shoot in situations where you only got one chance. Most telling of all, she was completely unfazed by difficult conditions. Bad weather, poor lighting, emotional subjects, nothing threw her off her game. "Where did you learn to work under pressure like that?" James asked during one of their conversations. "Practice," Elena said simply. But James was a former newspaper photographer himself. He recognized the signs of someone who'd learned their craft in challenging environments. "Elena, I've worked with a lot of photographers. Your instincts aren't just good, they're trained. The way you position yourself, how you anticipate moments, your comfort with handheld shooting in low light, that's not self-taught." Elena's expression shifted slightly. "I read a lot of photography books. Books don't teach you to stay calm when everything's falling apart." James pressed gently. "Where did you really learn to shoot?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "Somewhere I don't talk about anymore." The Bend Historical Society had received a grant to digitize local photography archives. As part of the project, they were using AI to analyze and categorize thousands of images, identifying artistic techniques, historical significance, and photographer styles. Sarah Chen, the project coordinator, decided to include some contemporary local work for comparison. Elena had donated several prints to charity auctions over the years, and Sarah thought they'd make good examples of modern portrait photography. She scanned Elena's photos into the AI system, expecting routine analysis of composition and technique. What the AI found was extraordinary. The system didn't just analyze Elena's current work, it compared her photographic style to a massive database of images from news archives, art collections, and photography databases worldwide. The AI identified distinctive patterns in Elena's work: specific compositional techniques, a particular way of using natural light, an approach to capturing human emotion that matched a very particular photographic style. Then it found matches. Buried in news archives from the 1990s and early 2000s, the AI discovered photographs taken in war zones, refugee camps, and conflict areas around the world: Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia. Images that had won international awards, influenced policy, changed public perception of global conflicts, all taken by a photographer named Elena Volkov. According to the metadata, Elena Volkov had been one of the most respected war correspondents of her generation. Her photographs had appeared on the covers of Time, Newsweek, National Geographic. She'd won a Pulitzer Prize in 2001 for a series documenting civilian casualties in Afghanistan. But Elena Volkov had disappeared from the journalism world in 2008, right around the time Elena Madison had appeared in Bend, Oregon. The facial recognition analysis confirmed what the photographic style had suggested: they were the same person. Sarah faced a dilemma. She'd accidentally discovered that one of Ben's most beloved photographers was actually a famous war correspondent who'd apparently gone into hiding. But why had Elena Volkov become Elena Madison? And did she want her past revealed? Sarah decided on discretion. She reached out to Elena privately. "Elena, I need to show you something," she said, arriving at the studio with a laptop and a concerned expression. Sarah pulled up the AI analysis, page after page of comparisons between Elena's current portrait work and her award-winning war photography, the stylistic matches, the facial recognition results, the timeline that showed Elena Volkov vanishing just as Elena Madison appeared. Elena looked at the screen for a long time without speaking. "How many people know?" Elena asked finally. "Just me. The AI system flagged the matches, but I haven't shared the results with anyone." Elena nodded slowly. "Elena Volkov, I haven't heard that name in 15 years. The Pulitzer Prize winner, the photographer who documented the Kosovo crisis. Among other things, yes." Sarah leaned forward. "Elena, your war photographs are legendary. They changed how people understood those conflicts. Why did you disappear?" Elena was quiet for several minutes, her hands unconsciously adjusting the camera settings on the equipment nearby, a nervous habit from years of checking gear under pressure. "Because I got too close," she said finally, "and it nearly killed me." She'd started as a freelance photographer in the early 1990s, covering conflicts in Eastern Europe, young, idealistic, convinced that the right photograph at the right moment could change the world. "I was good at it," Elena said. "Maybe too good. I could get into places other photographers couldn't, capture images that told stories nobody else was telling. The work was dangerous, but Elena had a talent for staying invisible, for earning trust in impossible situations, for being in the right place when history was being made. The Pulitzer was for a series I shot in Kabul, women's hospital that had been hit by shelling. The images showed the human cost of war in ways that statistics couldn't capture, but success in war photography came with a price. Elena had witnessed atrocities, documented suffering, lived with the constant stress of working in combat zones. You think you can just observe, just document, stay objective, but you can't unsee things, can't unfeel them. The breaking point came in 2008, during her final assignment in Iraq. I was embedded with a unit outside Baghdad. We were documenting reconstruction efforts when the convoy hit an IED. The explosion was massive." Elena paused, her hands stilling on the camera equipment. "I survived because I was in the rear vehicle, protected by all the others, but I watched people die. People I'd been photographing, talking to, sharing meals with. When the dust settled, Elena found herself holding her camera, instinctively shooting even as her world collapsed around her. She captured the aftermath, the rescue efforts, the faces of survivors. The photographs were technically perfect," she said quietly, "Pulitzer-quality stuff, and I hated every single frame." That was when Elena Volkov decided to disappear. "I came to Bend because it was the opposite of everywhere I'd been," Elena continued. "Safe, quiet, beautiful. People here had problems, but they were human-sized problems. Broken hearts, family drama, job stress, not life and death, not history changing. The transition hadn't been easy. Elena had savings from her years as a war correspondent, but she'd needed to learn an entirely different kind of photography. Portrait work is harder than people think. In war zones, the drama is external. You're documenting events, but in portraits, you're trying to capture someone's essence, their story, who they really are. What Elena discovered was that her war experience had given her unique skills as a portrait photographer. She could read faces, understand pain, recognize strength and vulnerability in ways that most photographers couldn't. When you photographed people in the worst moments of their lives, you learn to see past the surface. That translates to portrait work. I can see the real person, not just how they want to appear. Elena's work gradually became known throughout Oregon, not because she advertised her background, but because her photographs had a quality that set them apart. They revealed truth in ways that made people feel seen, understood, valued. Every wedding I shoot, every family portrait, it's like I'm documenting happiness instead of suffering, capturing love instead of loss. It's healing. Sarah understood. You're still telling stories, just different ones. Exactly. And these stories don't keep me awake at night.
Word of Elena's true identity began spreading quietly through the photography community, not as gossip but as recognition of someone whose work had influenced an entire generation of photojournalists. The revelation brought opportunities Elena hadn't expected. Art galleries wanted to exhibit her war photographs alongside her portrait work. Photography schools invited her to lecture. Publishers offered book deals for collections of her conflict photography. Elena turned them all down. That work was important, she told Sarah. It needed to be done, and I'm glad I did it. But that chapter of my life is closed. However, Elena did agree to one project. A local magazine wanted to do a feature about her journey from war photographer to portrait artist, not sensationalizing her past, but exploring how trauma could be transformed into healing through art. If talking about it helps other people who are struggling with their own difficult pasts, then maybe it's worth it, Elena decided. The article, when it was published, resonated with people far beyond Bend. Veterans dealing with PTSD, journalists struggling with the emotional toll of their work, artists of all kinds who'd experienced trauma and were looking for ways to transform it into something meaningful. Elena started getting letters from around the world, not asking for interviews or photo shoots, but sharing stories of their own transformation, their own journey from pain to purpose. I realized something, Elena told Sarah. Running away from your past doesn't heal it, but you don't have to be trapped by it either. You can take what you learned and use it to create something better. Today, Elena Madison Photography is still located on Main Street in Bend. Elena still shoots weddings and family portraits, but now she also runs workshops for photographers dealing with trauma, consults with journalism schools about photographer safety, and mentors young photojournalists. The AI system that discovered her true identity has been refined and implemented by news organizations worldwide, not to expose photographers who want privacy, but to preserve the work of journalists whose archives might otherwise be lost or forgotten. Elena's case showed us something important, the project coordinator noted. AI can help us understand not just who took a photograph, but how their experiences shaped their artistic vision. Elena keeps some of her war photographs on display now. Not the most graphic or devastating images, but the ones that showed resilience, hope, humanity persisting in the darkest circumstances. These photographs represent a part of my life I needed to complete, she explains to visitors. But they're not the end of my story. They're the foundation for everything that came after. The technique Elena developed, using portrait photography as a form of therapy and storytelling, has influenced photographers working in post-conflict zones, disaster areas, and communities dealing with collective trauma. Elena showed us that the same skills that capture suffering can capture healing, noted one colleague. The same eye that sees tragedy can see triumph. Using her language skills, she spoke 5 languages fluently, and cultural understanding developed during her war correspondent years. She began documenting the stories of people rebuilding their lives in America. These portraits aren't about the trauma they left behind, Elena explained. They're about the strength it took to survive, the courage it took to start over, the hope they're building for their children. The project, called New Beginnings, became a traveling exhibition that toured community centers, schools, and galleries across the Pacific Northwest. Each portrait was accompanied by a short story written in collaboration with the subject, telling not just where they'd come from, but who they were becoming. One photograph in particular captured national attention: a young Syrian refugee girl, maybe 8 years old, holding a camera and grinning at Elena behind the lens. The girl's family had fled Aleppo, but in Elena's portrait, she wasn't a victim or a statistic. She was a kid who loved photography and wanted to be an artist when she grew up. That's what I learned, Elena reflected. The most powerful photographs aren't the ones that show people at their worst moments, they're the ones that show people reclaiming their stories. The artificial intelligence that uncovered Elena's secret had been designed to analyze photographic technique, but it discovered something more important: how an artist's past experiences, even traumatic ones, could be transformed into tools for healing and connection. Elena Volkov had spent 15 years documenting humanity's capacity for destruction. Elena Madison spent 15 more years documenting humanity's capacity for healing. Both were true. Both were necessary, and both were part of the same story. The war correspondent who became a portrait photographer represents something important about how we process trauma and find purpose. Elena's story shows us that our most difficult experiences don't have to define us, but they can inform the way we help others. Her journey from documenting suffering to capturing joy proves that artificial intelligence isn't just about identifying patterns in data. Sometimes it's about recognizing patterns in healing, how people transform their pain into purpose, their trauma into art, their scars into strength. And sometimes the most important stories aren't the ones that make headlines, they're the quiet ones, captured in wedding albums and family portraits, showing that after everything: war, loss, devastation, people still choose to celebrate love, create families, and believe in the future. Because that's what resilience looks like, not the absence of scars but the presence of hope. Call to action. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever met someone who transformed their difficult past into a gift for others? Someone who took their hardest experiences and used them to create beauty, healing, or hope? Share their stories in the comments below. Tell us about the artists, teachers, helpers, and healers who turned their trauma into purpose. And if this story moved you, subscribe to AI Human Stories. Because in a world where artificial intelligence can spot patterns in art and life, the most important discoveries aren't about technology, they're about recognizing that our deepest wounds can become our greatest strengths, and that sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the most difficult experiences. Until next time, remember, every scar tells a story, and some stories need to be told.